The Fifth Circuit recently ruled that suppressors are not arms and therefore don't trigger 2A protections. But now the DOJ and Pam Bondi have notified the Fifth Circuit that the DOJ is changing their position, and her chief of staff just put out a statement that they are changing their position on suppressors and changing the position on a lot of other 2A issues. So let's break down what is happening. Now, before we get into the video, I want to thank the new sponsor on this channel, which is Montana Knife Co. If you're into high quality American-made knives, you need to check out MKC. MKC was founded by one of the most experienced master bladesmiths in the entire world, whose name is Josh Smith. Josh made his first hunting knife at just 11 years old and became a master bladesmith at just 19. There are only about 150 of those individuals in the world, so you know you're getting high quality knives with MKC. These knives are absolutely amazing and they always sell out fast. I'm talking about they sell out in just minutes. And they have some really big news. MKC is dropping 5 brand new tactical knife models on March 27th. I've had the luxury of trying out the TF24, the War Goat, and the TF24. I actually run the War Goat on my range belt, so this is the knife that's been on my range belt for quite a while now. I absolutely love it, but like I mentioned, they're dropping other models as well, like the VF24 and the TF24. I cannot recommend them enough. Like I said, they sell out super fast, so if you want to get one of these knives, I highly recommend you sign up to the newsletter, and that will be linked down below in the detail section and the pinned comment. So thank you again to MKC for sponsoring this channel. I recommend it to you guys because these are working knives for working people. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we're going to be discussing some very important DOJ position changes on the issue of suppressors and other critical lawsuits that are really sparking the change here and forcing the DOJ's hand to finally have to comply with the Trump executive order. Recently, the Fifth Circuit ruled that suppressors are not protected arms. This case has now been filed for Fifth Circuit en banc panel review, and the Fifth Circuit is deciding whether or not they're going to grant re-review to this case. The DOJ through Pam Bondi have actually signaled a major federal shift also on suppressors that is going to impact this case. Last we talked about this case, we saw that some Biden administration holdovers within the DOJ had filed a brief in this case, and they continued to argue that suppressors are not protected arms. This, of course, was contrary to the executive order that was issued by Trump and all the claims from the Trump administration and the AG's office that they were going to protect 2A rights. But now, just a couple days after that, Pam Bondi and the DOJ have notified the court that they want to hold the case for 30 days so that they can reconsider the potential, changes of their position on suppressors. And now we got a statement from her chief of staff, and he said that they want to change the position on Second Amendment lawsuits and a lot of other issues. And then he signaled out expressly suppressors in this case here, which has triggered all of this consideration. Now, the main case that shined a light on the rogue Biden attorneys who were still trying to push anti-gun positions within the US was the US versus Peterson case. In this case, back in 2022, both federal and state law enforcement officers executed warrants at Mr. Peterson's home in Louisiana. A federal task force included ATF agents and 50 other law enforcement officers who searched Mr. Peterson's home, and eventually what they ended up finding was a single unregistered and serialized solvent trap, and he was found in violation of the NFA and charged criminally. Now, the search warrant was based on issues with Mr. Peterson operating a gun store out of his home. Specifically, the ATF alleged that there were straw purchases, improper record keeping of 4473 forms, a failure to actually forward multiple firearms purchase forms back to the ATF. And then they also said that there were some firearms that were sold at his gun store that were later found at crime scenes. And again, the entire lawsuit really started because a single solvent trap was found in his home safe within his bedroom. In response to the criminal charge of Mr. Peterson, violating the NFA, he filed a motion to dismiss based on the Second Amendment, but that was denied. That then led Mr. Peterson to appeal to the Fifth Circuit for a reversal of that denial. And on review, a 3-judge panel in the Fifth Circuit actually sided with the ATF and the DOJ, finding that Mr. Peterson's motion to dismiss was properly rejected because they believe the Second Amendment is not implicated in this case because primarily they believe suppressors are not arms and therefore not protected by the Second Amendment. In their ruling, the Fifth Circuit stated that whether suppressors constitute arms is an issue of first impression in our circuit. And so far as we can tell, every court to have addressed it has decided the question in the negative. Here, the Fifth Circuit looked at whether or not suppressors are a weapon of offense or an armor of defense, or are used to cast at or strike at another, because that is one of the primary definitions that they use to determine whether or not something is an arm. The Fifth Circuit incorrectly found that these are not arms. They stated that Peterson posits that suppressors are an integral part of a firearm and therefore warrant Second Amendment protections, but that is wrong. A suppressor by itself is not a weapon. Without being attached to a firearm, it would not be of much use for self-defense. And unless a suppressor itself is thrown, it cannot do any casting or striking. The Fifth Circuit went on to find that suppressors are not a necessary accoutrement or simply a necessary accessory of a firearm, and they found that they're not absolutely required for the function of a firearm, and therefore they're not protected. Now, that inherently was a very concerning decision, so Mr. Peterson and his counsel filed for a rehearing en banc in the Fifth Circuit. Just a couple days ago, the DOJ responded to that petition for a rehearing en banc, and they still argued that the Fifth Circuit en banc panel should deny review to this because they still believe that suppressors are not protected arms. That position of the DOJ shocked everyone, especially with the Trump administration now in control and the executive order to protect the Second Amendment rights which he issued. Well, it seems like we made enough noise and pointed enough attention on this case to where now AG Bondi and the DOJ recently notified the Fifth Circuit en banc panel that they want to hold the case so that they can reconsider their position on suppressors and potentially, maybe file a new brief in this case or maybe not proceed forward in defending this type of suppressor restriction. In the notice to the Fifth Circuit, the DOJ stated that on February 7th, 2025, the President issued executive order protecting Second Amendment rights, directing the Attorney General to examine all executive actions to present a proposed plan to protect the Second Amendment rights of all Americans. In implementing that order, the DOJ is re-evaluating its litigation positions regarding silencers. Accordingly, the government respectfully requests that the court delay ruling on Peterson's motion for a rehearing en banc for 30 days. At that time, the government will inform the court of the status of its review and, if warranted, move for leave to file an amended response. Now, why is that so important? Well, we have seen that even after the change in the administration, there were still some Biden holdovers within the DOJ who were still pushing for anti-gun policies, and they were still pushing for anti-gun arguments in these lawsuits. But now they're being exposed, and it seems like the AG's office is finally changing course. Recently, after all the blowback in this case and other cases and all the news circulating around the AG's office potentially still pushing for anti-gun policies, the chief of staff for the AG's office in the DOJ stated that protecting the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens is a high priority for AG Bondi. To that end, the department will be reevaluating some of its recent litigation positions on Second Amendment issues, including silencers. So that is a huge statement from higher-ups within the DOJ saying that they are very much aware of this issue, of this case, and they're going to change course. This also signals that we may get some radical shifts at a national level on some of the national policies surrounding suppressors and maybe other issues as well. So this, of course, is a very important case. I'm glad to see that this U.S. versus Peterson case made a lot of noise and it, shined a light on some of the Biden administration holdovers who are still, arguing for anti-gun policies. And I'm glad to see that the issue of suppressors has been elevated to a level where now the AG and her office are finally going to readdress this issue. And maybe we're going to get some radical shifts on suppressor policies nationwide. So this is something we're going to be keeping our eyes on very closely to see how this develops and see how the AG's office decides to proceed forward with this case and just the national policy at large. And as we get more information, as things change, I will let you guys know. But as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And never forget, the station was built by armed scholars, and the station will be maintained by armed scholars.